next guest, who is a person I'm getting to know more and more through this FSHD radio show. Molly White, she's the VP Medical Communications and Advocacy at Dyne Therapeutics, one of our sponsors. You want to learn more about Dyne, please do so. Please visit dyne-tx.com. And here she is live on Zoom on the Radiothon. Hi, Molly. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing well. Hanging in. It's nice to meet so many new people or familiar people. We've talked several times in the past, and I knew you were probably just chomping at the bit, right, to come right back on. So you
There's nothing I like better, really.
Put your name
I
right on.
I look forward to this.
Well, I really hope I'm not the highlight of your day, but I appreciate that you're here.
I am delighted. And I have to tell you, I am so impressed with this event. I think the way FSHD Society and you came up with this idea and pivoted to this format, particularly this year, was really creative. We're thrilled to be part of it. And I hope it goes incredibly well.
Thanks. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. As you see, I'm without words when I get compliments, because it's so there's such a huge foundation like behind me, and they are there. It's Lee and Beth and June and Anna and Kim, and then our great sponsors, Dyne being one of them, to help in this. I mean, last year we did our first venture of this, and it was me calling in between guests to the next guest and only audio. And it was fine. I mean, it worked great. That's what we did. But to have the support and then, figuring out Zoom and how this is so much better. This is so much better.
This is very fancy.
This is so fancy schmancy. So
and tell us people discussing things today. I've been looking at the list, and I'm looking forward to checking in on a lot of these events. I think it's great.
Yeah. And I think that helps too, that people know, who is coming onto the show. So, who is like their top, people that they want to listen into, kind of give them a heads up. Cause I know it's a busy day. It is just a Tuesday. And I'm hoping that they're tuning in as much as possible. Maybe they put aside their normal radio program or something and have this on the background. Yeah. Right. Yes. They're going to get so tired of hearing my voice. So that's why I want to ask you the next question, so you can talk a bit, Molly. Tell us some of the updates. What's going on with Dyne? I know you're a big sponsor in this event today, which we do appreciate. But give us a little bit of what's going on with Dyne. I know last time you were on, there was talks about filing FDA paperwork and things of that nature.
So we have been, Dyne has a commitment, which is quality, speed, cost. So quality is the most important thing we work on. Speed is the second most important thing we sort of focus on, and cost is last. And I would say that we are continuing with that very important motto as we go forward. So we are moving as quickly as we can to get the 3 lead programs that we're focused on into the clinic. I think I mentioned with you all last time that what we've been able to share publicly is we have 3 investigational new drug applications coming between the 4th quarter of next year, which is almost this year, and 12 months after that. We know that DM1, myotonic dystrophy type 1, and Duchenne will be in the first part of that window, and we know that FSHD will follow a couple of quarters behind. So we are, as you can imagine from that kind of a schedule, we have a lot of work going on simultaneously. We've been adding really excellent, strong members to the team almost weekly, and we are just building along that frame, that time frame of quality, speed, cost to get these potential therapies into the clinic as quickly as we can. So that's pretty much what everybody is doing most of their day, their conscious day at this point.
How many are we thinking that are hopeful here to get to the stage you said was the 4th quarter of 2021, then you're kind of eyeballing?
Well, so what we've been able to share publicly at this point is that between the 4th quarter of 2021, basically the year coming up, and the following 4th quarter, we will have launched 3 INDs, investigation of new drug applications with the FDA, which, as you know, is the first part of really getting into the clinic. And we know, as I mentioned, that the first 2 will be in close proximity, myotonic dystrophy type 1 and Duchenne, and then a couple quarters later will be FSHD.
How about the voice of the patient report? The impact that had in your opinion of kind of helping this whole process move forward with the FDA?
You know, I was actually chatting. Well, we chatted about it. I've chatted with June about it. I can't overemphasize how important it is for people in the community to come together and put together an organized discussion with the FDA around what it's like to live with the disease, how to understand symptom burden in a really comprehensive way for the FDA, and then to describe for them what a clinically meaningful benefit means. And it seems sort of intuitive if you're living with a disease like FSHD and you've been involved in the community for some time. But when you think about the number of biotech and pharma companies out there that bring in these expert, PhDs and scientists from many different areas and maybe have been introduced to muscle diseases for the first time or have been introduced to FSHD for the first time, there's a lot of information that we all need to understand to design the best potential therapy in the most sensitive, thoughtful, and potentially successful way. And the best way, one of the best ways to do that is to continue beyond the research arena to understand from the patient perspective what the disease is really like. And I know from my prior life working in patient advocacy that when we first started meeting with the FDA around the disease that I worked on then, when the FDA Neurology Leadership Division talked about myotonic dystrophy or muscular dystrophy, they talked about kids in wheelchairs. And we all know FSHD is not primarily a muscle disease of children in wheelchairs. So, even guys at that level who are prodigiously qualified don't have all the information they need to cover 7,000 different rare diseases and all the other diseases they cover. So the kind of information that was shared at that PFDD meeting in June was incredibly important, and it is the formal document that the FDA will pull as one of its pieces of information when it starts reviewing potential therapies for FSHD. So all of the input, all of the work that you all did, all the work that FSHD Society did and other organizations, and all of the work that your community members put in was invaluable. And we all cite it, we will all use it, we will all reference it, and the FDA will use it. It's incredibly important information. It's probably the single most high profile way that you can provide information to really important regulatory bodies like the FDA about your disease.
Oh. Now you had,
Oh.
I mean, that's huge, right? I mean, yeah.
It's really big, yes. Yeah, and I think it's important, one of the things that struck me in listening to these different muscle disease PFDD meetings is that if you ask someone who's not intimately involved in these diseases, what's a meaningful benefit? If you're living with FSHD, if you're living with myotonic dystrophy or a muscle disease, what's a clinically meaningful benefit? Because you can design a therapy that targets a component of the disease that's not considered clinically meaningful by the patient. So the FDA is a lot less interested in approving it because the community is not going to tell them that they care that much. So understanding clinically meaningful benefit from the perspective of people living with the disease is incredibly important. And one of the things that has struck me about communities of people living with serious muscle diseases is that just having some amount of certainty around progression and understanding that with a potential therapy, you can slow progression or stop progression is enough of a clinically meaningful benefit that it would be appropriate to approve a therapy that could accomplish that. And I think, and I know from speaking with a number of people in the FSHD community, I think the uncertainty of knowing where you're going in the future is a big potential burden that people live with. And having some certainty around slowing or stopping progression would be incredibly meaningful, but it's not immediately leaping to mind for people that aren't more involved in the disease. And that's the kind of information that comes out of something like a PFDD meeting.
Now Diane had the fireside chat earlier this year. You had 3 patients, right? That
we had, well, we had 2 individuals and a couple. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there was a tie-in there, right? Why don't you talk a little bit about that fireside chat? I thought that was really cool, what you guys did.
Yeah, I really love those fireside chats, and I think they are a highlight of the people on the Dine team. hearing people living with these diseases, that, you know, for whom you're working on therapies, and having them talk about what it's like to be diagnosed, you know, what the different stages of moving forward look like, what the disease burden looks like to them, and the different kind of the nuance, the level of nuance that you can understand about a disease, and how, you know, and how to understand that disease and the people living with it as you're working on it is really powerful. And I think you and I talked about this because in my last job, one of the things the chairman of my board used to say is, we like to call it emotional blackmail. And what it is basically is we're saying, we want the people working on these diseases to understand in a really emotionally powerful way what it's like for the people living with this disease and who they're working for, right? So it's not that you're just developing a potential therapy for a potential population. You're developing a therapy for Howard. You're developing a therapy for Angela and Laszlo. You're developing a therapy for Tim, right? And that changes the nature of the urgency and the focus, I think, in just ways that are incredibly important.
It does drive the engine, right? I mean, it's got that emotional push behind it, instead of just being faceless cell, or let's figure this little problem out. This has a face to it, and here are all the almost million faces that you could put to it. Not to mention the, you know, ripple effect of caregivers, family members, friends, etc. That it all affects within that.
Yeah, it's a huge community.
It is.
And I think when people have that sense of urgency and they're working for people that are specific people for them, I think it just really ups the amount of emotional investment you have in the work you're doing.
Is that, in a nutshell, why it's so important for Dyne to speak with patients and have that involvement?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you really discover, you know, I remember on another disease, you know, that disease was also considered a muscle disease. And no one ever acknowledged that there was a brain component to that disease. And there were people in the community going from principal investigator to academic investigator to doctor saying, you guys need to understand that there's a huge, very significant brain-related component to this disease that we've got to understand, and we have to acknowledge that this disease is not just muscle. And it took a while, and it took people in the community to make the case. It wasn't showing up through the work that was being done necessarily, you know, in a significant way in the lab. So I can't, you know, when we think about I did the FSHD university session recently, which was fantastic. I just love these conversations, by the way. You know, the idea that as we go forward, and it's been going on for a number of years now, that the idea that people living with these diseases become more and more formal and central to the discussion is really important. And, you know, drug developers are now talking about bringing communities of patients in much earlier in the process and understanding what, you know, clinical trials should look like, and what does an appropriate clinical study visit look like for a patient who may be in a wheelchair, who has mobility issues, who has specific needs that need to be addressed. You know, all of the nuances that come from understanding the patient perspective just change the way you think about developing for the disease. And I, you know, my advice to everybody in the FSHD community is, if there's a study you can join, you should absolutely join it. There's never enough information on these rare diseases to really be as effective as, you know, we would love to be. If you can join registries, you should absolutely join them, so we know where you are when there are studies, when there are clinical trials, when there are things we need to find out. You know, the PFDD meeting was incredible. And I think, you know, above and beyond, particularly today, we have to support these organizations. It's a tough year, it's a tough time. And organizations like FSHD Society and the others out there focusing on the FSHD community are changing the game for this disease. And we couldn't do it without you guys, absolutely. And we're delighted to be able to help and participate. And I think everybody in the community that can support the effort today is super important.
Are you going to have another fireside chat coming up in like 2021, like this next year, the annual?
Yeah.
And what is that looking like in the beginning stages? Are you allowed to say?
Funny you should ask. So, you know, we had this wonderful meeting this year where we had these different community members talk about what it's like to live with the disease and really help the community understand, what it looks like to have FSHD. And the question in 2021 is, how do we evolve that? How does it become, how do we continue that communication forward? So we'll have, next year we're likely to have almost double the number of employees we have this year. We certainly want those people to be introduced to this community as well. But we also want to think about, what else does the community want to share? What else do we need to know? What else, would it make more sense to have someone like, Jamshid help co-facilitate the next one? Would it make sense to have you facilitate it perhaps? That would be super fun. Who do we pick? How do we frame it so that we keep that conversation going forward and we continue to delve deeper and really understand this community that we're working with and for?
Yeah, it's an amazing collaboration partnership. I find it different, not that other therapeutic companies aren't trying to help bridge the gap or be important to our community. It just feels like Dyne, you guys, as a company, it almost seems like the company's mission and motto is kind of put that patient in front a little bit. I do like your quality, speed, cost, but it almost seems like before even those, you're kind of saying people.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a unique place.
Yeah,
I also think. Yes.
Yeah. So I'll be sending my resume. No.
Okay, great. I'm going to sign you up for next year. I think that would be great.
Oh, no, you're a blast to talk to, Molly. I do appreciate that. It's in this stretch, I'm getting to my about midpoint maybe-ish, having Molly White right there. I was like, all right, there's my battery recharge a little bit to kind of keep this going. Before we let you go, I guess maybe two questions. One, where we've plugged the website, maybe that's it, to where people learn more about Dyne. But also, what is the big thing you're maybe most excited for that you know of and that you can share coming up in like this next year? We all want to look forward to 2021.
I know.
2020 to get lost.
I can't wait myself. But one thing we are going to launch next year, which I'm very excited about, and again, I am going to reach out to you about this, is we're going to start launching quarterly at least triennial webinars with our different communities of people living with these diseases. And we're going to have just, chats. So, every quarter we'll have a financial update. And the plan is that we will have shortly after that, we'll have a community update where we'll meet with, for instance, we'll partner with the FSHD Society and others to have an FSHD, introduction to Dyne. We'd love to hear from you, ask us questions, let's get to know each other. And then we'll have subsequent meetings, probably on a roughly quarterly basis, just to check in, to make sure that you all know what we're up to make sure that if you have questions, if the community would like to make sure that they are able to share certain things, that we're able to do that. We want to make sure that it's not a situation where all of a sudden we're just announcing there's a trial and there's been no sort of ongoing communication to make sure that we have a good, strong relationship. So I'm very excited about those. And we're still noodling some of the ways that we can make those interesting and really kind of helpful and informative for people living with these diseases. But I think that's going to be an interesting update for next year.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. I like that.
Yeah.
All the community involvement.
It's right up your alley.
You're good. Absolutely. Absolutely. Right up my,
I need you.
Well, I don't know jack about the science side of it. So I figured, okay, what like can I do? I think I've learned more this morning over the researchers we've had in than I've ever learned about this. And there's more to come, so teaser.
Excellent.
So, and thank you, Molly, for joining us today. Thank you to Dyne. Visit dyne-tx.com to learn more about this amazing company, their involvement with our community. And I'm sure there's probably a little information about you on there too, right? Somewhere on that website, Molly?
I think there might be, yeah.
Might be. So if you want to learn more about Molly White as well.
I wouldn't rush over there.
You can also, here's another plug. You can also catch episode of Molly White's interview on the FSHD Society radio show. You can find that on Spotify. It's all out there, Google Podcasts, etc. if you want to pick up on that. So thanks, Molly, for being here. We appreciate
Always
you.
Pleasure.
Thanksgiving Tuesday. Much love to you. Thank you much.
You too. Best of luck today.